Admiral Lee Do-yun stood at the viewing window of his transport ship, watching the crystal towers of Nexus Prime grow larger as they approached. The alien city sparkled like diamonds against the purple sky, its impossible architecture defying everything humans knew about engineering. Spires twisted through the air without visible support, connected by bridges of pure light that pulsed with unknown energy. Beautiful, isn't it? Dr. Park Mina joined him at the window, her reflection ghostly in the transparent metal. Hard to believe they built all this just to discuss how dangerous we are. Lee turned to look at his old friend. They had served together for 15 years, first as enemies when she was a Martian rebel and he was Earth military, then as allies when they both realized the real fight was among the stars. Now she was Earth's top expert on alien minds, and he was the man everyone looked to when things got bad. They're scared, Lee said simply. When people get scared, they do stupid things. The transport docked with a gentle bump that barely registered through the artificial gravity. Lee straightened his uniform one last time. The simple blue and white of Earth's flag looked plain compared to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by alien diplomats. But that was the point. Humans didn't need fancy clothes to be dangerous. Captain Kim Taewon was waiting for them at the airlock, his young face serious. Admiral, the Senate has been in session for 6 hours already. They're not waiting for our arrival. Good, Lee replied. Let them talk themselves tired before we get there. The three humans walked through corridors filled with beings from across the galaxy. Some looked almost human except for extra arms or strange-colored skin. Others were so alien that Lee's brain hurt trying to understand what he was seeing. A creature that looked like living water flowed past them, somehow maintaining shape without a container. A being made of crystalline structures sang in frequencies that made their teeth ache. But despite all their differences, Lee noticed one thing they all shared. When they saw the humans coming, they moved out of the way. Some did it with obvious fear, others with careful respect, but none of them wanted to block the path of Earth's delegation. The Senate chamber was a massive sphere with seats arranged on every surface, even hanging upside down from the ceiling. Gravity worked differently for each section, allowing species with different needs to attend the same meeting. At the center floated a platform where speakers could address the entire assembly. Senator Veltar Prime Yulthana was speaking when they entered. The tall, pale alien had large black eyes and spoke without moving her mouth, her words appearing directly in everyone's mind through telepathy. Lee had always found it unsettling, like having someone else's thoughts forced into his head. Humans spread through space like a virus. Yulthana's mental voice was cold and precise. In 50 years, they have established colonies in 17 star systems. They ignore our trade laws, refuse to share their technology, and form military alliances with species we have classified as primitive. Lee took his seat in the human section and listened as one senator after another stood to accuse his species of various crimes. The Corvan Empire complained that humans had helped the Tauri rebels overthrow their colonial government. The Nexus Collective was angry that humans refused to share their quantum computer designs. Smaller species griped about human merchants undercutting their prices or human diplomats offering better trade deals. They are unpredictable, rumbled Senator Gorth of the Stone Walkers, his massive, rocky form shaking the platform when he moved. Our algorithms cannot predict their behavior patterns. This makes them a threat to galactic stability. They reproduce too quickly, added Senator Jivak of the Hive Minds. Their population growth exceeds safe parameters for resource allocation. They ask too many questions, complained Senator Rixtal of the Order Keepers. They refuse to accept established hierarchies and proper social structures. Lee watched the alien politicians work themselves into a frenzy of fear and resentment. It was almost funny how creatures from dozens of different worlds could agree on one thing. Humans were a problem that needed solving. Dr. Park Mina leaned over and whispered, "Notice they're not mentioning the real reason they're upset." Lee nodded. The real reason was simple. In 50 years, humanity had gone from primitive savages who barely knew fire existed to a spacefaring civilization that was winning every conflict they entered. Not because humans were stronger or smarter than aliens, but because they thought differently. Where other species saw impossible problems, humans saw interesting puzzles. Where aliens saw unchangeable traditions, humans saw suggestions they could ignore. Senator Yulthana raised her hand for silence, and the chamber fell quiet. The evidence is clear. Humanity poses a threat to the established order of galactic civilization. Therefore, the Senate will now vote on Resolution 2847. The resolution appeared on screens throughout the chamber, written in hundreds of different languages and communication methods. Lee read the human translation with growing anger. Resolution 2847 demanded that humans stop all expansion beyond their current territories. It required them to share all military and computer technology with the Senate within 1 standard year. It placed Senate observers on every human world to monitor compliance. It even specified that no human could hold command positions in any mixed-species organizations. The vote was swift and decisive. 43 species voted in favor, only 3 voted against, and Lee recognized them as species that had recently signed defense treaties with Earth. 1 species abstained. Senator Yulthana's satisfaction was clear even without telepathy. Resolution 2847 passes by overwhelming majority. Admiral Lee, you will now formally accept these terms on behalf of humanity. Lee stood slowly and walked to the center platform. The chamber fell silent as every alien eye, antenna, and sensor focused on him. He could feel their expectation, their certainty that he would bow to their superior numbers and firepower. I have reviewed your resolution, Lee said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. I have discussed it with my government and my people. He paused, letting the silence stretch until some of the aliens began shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Humanity's response is simple, Lee continued. We respectfully decline. The chamber erupted in shocked sounds from dozens of different species. Some aliens made noise through their mouths, others through specialized organs, and a few communicated their outrage through color changes or electromagnetic pulses. Senator Yulthana's mental voice cut through the chaos like a blade. You cannot simply refuse a Senate resolution, Admiral. You are 1 species among 47. You have no choice but to comply. Lee smiled, the expression looking strange and dangerous to aliens who weren't familiar with human facial expressions. Senator, you seem to misunderstand something fundamental about humanity. We always have a choice. We choose to remain free. Then you choose war. Senator Gorth rumbled, his rocky exterior glowing with heat. No, Lee replied calmly. We choose to defend ourselves. There's a difference, though I don't expect you to understand it. Senator Yulthana floated closer to the platform, her black eyes reflecting the chamber's lights. You have 30 standard days to reconsider, Admiral. After that, the Senate will take corrective action to ensure galactic stability. 30 days, Lee nodded. That should be enough time. Enough time for what? Yulthana demanded. Lee's smile grew wider, showing teeth that reminded every predator species in the chamber of their own hunting instincts. Enough time for you to realize you've made a terrible mistake. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Lee heard Yulthana whisper to her aide in a tone meant to be private but picked up by human hearing. They still don't understand. Humans cannot be reasoned with. They can only be eliminated. Lee pretended not to hear, but made a mental note. Some aliens were about to learn that the most dangerous thing in the galaxy wasn't a human who wanted to fight. It was a human who had tried everything else first. The alarms started screaming at Eero 347 Earth Standard Time, 28 days after Admiral Lee Do-hyun had walked out of the Senate chamber. Colonel Choi Hana was already awake, sitting at her desk in Earth's Special Operations Command, when the first reports came flooding in. "Ma'am, we're getting distress signals from 17 colonies simultaneously," reported Lieutenant Park, his voice tight with worry. New Seoul Colony, Busan Station, the mining operation on Daegu Prime, they're all under attack. Hana stood and walked to the main display screen. Red dots were appearing across human space like a plague spreading through their territory. Each dot represented thousands of human lives in danger. "What kind of attack?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Unknown weapon systems, ma'am." The signals cut out too fast to get detailed readings. But the last transmission from New Seoul mentioned ships that looked like nothing they'd ever seen before. Hana nodded grimly. The Galactic Senate hadn't been idle during their 30-day ultimatum. They had been planning this assault, timing it perfectly to hit every major human settlement at once. On Nexus Station, 3 light-years from Earth, engineer Yoon Ji-won was trying to understand why her equipment had suddenly stopped working. The quantum computers that ran the station's defense grid had simply shut down, their screens showing nothing but static. The communication arrays were dead. Even the backup power systems were failing one by one. "It's like our technology is forgetting how to work," she muttered to herself, pulling apart a control panel that should have been functioning perfectly. The components looked fine, but when she tried to activate them, nothing happened. Outside the station's windows, strange shapes moved through space. The alien ships didn't look like normal vessels. They seemed to bend reality around them, making it hard to focus on their exact shape or size. When human fighters launched to intercept them, the small ships simply stopped working halfway to their targets, floating helplessly as their systems failed. Yoon understood what was happening now. The Senate wasn't trying to destroy human technology. They were using some kind of quantum disruption field that made human machines forget how to function. It was subtle, elegant, and completely terrifying. On New Seoul Colony, Captain Kim Tae-won was discovering that the Senate's plan was even more complex than they had first realized. The colony's 20 million inhabitants were falling sick with a mysterious illness that seemed to target only humans. The alien traders who lived in the international district were perfectly fine, but every human was developing the same symptoms: high fever, weakness, and difficulty breathing. "Sir, our medical computers are down," reported Dr. Yoon from the colony's main hospital. "We can't analyze the pathogen, but it's clearly designed to affect human biology specifically." Kim stared out at his city from the command center windows. New Seoul had been humanity's greatest achievement in space, a gleaming metropolis built in the rings around a gas giant. Now it was under siege by an enemy that attacked their technology and their bodies simultaneously. "How long before the illness becomes critical?" he asked. "At the current progression rate, maybe 72 hours before we start seeing deaths. The children and elderly are already in serious condition." Kim activated his personal communicator, one of the few devices still working. "This is Captain Kim Tae-won of New Seoul Colony to any human forces receiving this transmission. We are under attack by weapons that disable our technology and biological agents that target our species. We will not surrender. I repeat, we will not surrender." Back on Earth, President Kang Hyun-woo was reading reports from across human space with growing anger. The attacks were coordinated and sophisticated, designed not to destroy humanity, but to force them into submission. The Senate wanted humans alive but helpless, dependent on alien mercy for survival. "They studied us," said Dr. Park Mina, who had arrived at the emergency meeting still wearing her pajamas. "Every diplomatic exchange, every trade negotiation, every cultural festival we invited them to attend. They were cataloging our weaknesses the entire time." "How bad is it?" President Kang asked. "Bad," Admiral Lee Do-yun replied from the wall screen, transmitting from his flagship somewhere in space. "We're losing contact with colonies across 3 sectors. Our newest ships are completely disabled by whatever they're using. The older vessels with simpler systems are still functional, but they're no match for Senate technology." Colonel Hana stepped forward. Sir, I have teams ready to deploy for asymmetric warfare operations. If we can't fight them with ships, we'll have to fight them on the ground. Do it, the president ordered. But Hana, our people are dying out there. Whatever you do, do it fast. Engineer Yoon Ji-won was having the most productive day of her life, despite the circumstances. While her colleagues panicked about their failing systems, she was discovering something amazing. The quantum disruption field that was disabling human technology had a pattern. It wasn't random interference. It was a specific signal designed to target known human technological signatures. "Computer, analyze the disruption pattern," she said to her personal AI, one of the few systems still functioning because it used experimental quantum encryption. "Pattern analysis complete," the AI replied. "The disruption field is based on detailed scans of human technology dating back 15 years. It targets specific frequency ranges and quantum signatures commonly used in human manufacturing." Yoon smiled for the first time since the attacks began. "So, if we change our signatures?" "Theoretical countermeasures are possible," the AI confirmed. "However, implementation would require completely rebuilding our technology base." "Or," Yoon said thoughtfully, "we could build something entirely new." On New Seoul Colony, the situation was growing desperate. The mysterious illness was spreading faster than predicted, and the quantum disruption field was preventing any evacuation attempts. Captain Kim had moved his command center to the colony's deepest levels, where older emergency systems still functioned. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from an unknown source," reported Communications Officer Lee. "Put it through." The voice that emerged from the speakers was unmistakably alien, with the cold precision of Veltar telepathic communication converted to audio. "Captain Kim Tae-won of New Seoul Colony, this is Senator Yulthana of the Galactic Senate. Your colony is now under Senate protection. Surrender immediately, and your people will receive medical treatment for the biological agent affecting them." Kim stared at the communications panel for a long moment. Around him, his officers waited for his response. Outside, 20 million humans were slowly dying from an alien plague while their technology failed around them. "Senator Yulthana," Kim said finally, "I have a message for you from the human race." "I am listening, Captain." Kim thought about his daughter, safe on Earth. He thought about the children in the colony's hospitals fighting an alien disease designed to kill them. He thought about humanity's long history of facing impossible odds and refusing to give up. "The message is this," he said calmly. "Go to hell." The communication channel went silent for several seconds before Yulthana's voice returned, colder than before. "Captain, you are condemning your people to death." "No, Senator," Kim replied. "I'm reminding them what it means to be human." As if summoned by his words, reports began flooding in from across the colony. Humans were adapting to their circumstances with typical creativity. Engineers were building new systems from scratch using materials the disruption field couldn't affect. Doctors were developing treatments using traditional methods combined with whatever medical equipment still functioned. Citizens were organizing neighborhood defense groups and communication networks that relied on human ingenuity rather than advanced technology. "Sir," reported Officer Lee, excitement clear in his voice, "we're getting similar reports from other colonies under attack. Everywhere the Senate is trying to force surrender, humans are finding ways to fight back." Kim nodded and activated the colony-wide communication system using a loudspeaker network that predated quantum technology by centuries. His voice echoed through every street and building in New Seoul. "Citizens of New Seoul Colony," he announced, "the Galactic Senate believes they can force us to surrender by taking away our machines and making our bodies weak. They think humans cannot survive without alien approval." He paused, looking out at his city where millions of people were proving the aliens wrong with every passing hour. "They're about to learn something important about humanity," Kim continued. "We didn't crawl out of caves and build spaceships because we were the strongest species on our planet. We did it because we were too stubborn to admit when something was impossible. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. Humans were discovering that their greatest strength had never been their technology. It was their refusal to accept defeat, their ability to adapt to any situation, and their absolute conviction that every problem had a solution if you were clever enough to find it. The Galactic Senate had tried to neutralize humanity by taking away their advantages. Instead, they had reminded humans what made them dangerous in the first place. Dr. Bei Yuna had been working for 36 hours straight in her underground laboratory on Mars, surviving on coffee and pure determination. While the galaxy burned around them, she was trying to understand something that might save humanity. The question that kept her awake was simple but crucial. Why couldn't aliens predict what humans would do? "Computer, display the neural scan data from the volunteer subjects," she said to her AI assistant, one of the few systems that still worked reliably since the Senate attacks began. The holographic display showed brain activity patterns from 50 different humans performing simple tasks. What she saw made her heart race with excitement. Every human brain showed something she had never noticed before. Tiny quantum fluctuations in their neural patterns that created a field of uncertainty around their thoughts. "Fascinating," she whispered. "We're walking quantum paradoxes." On the occupied world of Titan Base, Commander Oh Sungmin was discovering that being unpredictable was humanity's greatest weapon. The Corvan forces had taken the mining station 3 days ago, expecting the humans to surrender like civilized beings. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that broke every rule of proper warfare. "Sir, the humans have somehow turned our own supply depot into a trap," reported Corvan Captain Jektar to his superior. "When our soldiers went to collect ammunition, the building exploded, but our scanners showed no explosive devices." "How is that possible?" demanded General Vokran. "The humans filled the building with mining gas and waited for our energy weapons to ignite it. They used our own technology against us in a way our computers never predicted." General Vokran's 4 eyes narrowed in frustration. The Corvans were master strategists who had conquered 17 worlds using precise military calculations, but humans fought like animals, dirty, unpredictable, and without honor. Worse, their tactics actually worked. Commander O had been planning his next move from the maintenance tunnels beneath Titan Base. His team of 30 humans was facing 300 Corvan soldiers with superior weapons and armor. By every logical calculation, they should have surrendered days ago. "Listen up," he told his fighters, most of them miners and technicians who had never held weapons before the invasion. "The Corvans expect us to attack their strongest positions because that's what proper soldiers do. So we're going to do something completely different." Private Lim Dongyuk, barely 20 years old and scared out of his mind, raised his hand. "What's the plan, sir?" Oh smiled grimly. "We're going to make them so confused and frustrated that they defeat themselves." Over the next 2 days, the human resistance began what O called aggressive annoyance warfare. They rewired the base's automated systems to play human music at random times, specifically choosing songs that were mathematically proven to be irritating to Corvan hearing. They reprogrammed the food dispensers to only provide meals that smelled terrible to Corvan noses. They hacked the environmental controls to randomly adjust temperature and lighting in ways that disrupted Corvan sleep cycles. Most importantly, they never attacked the same way twice. Sometimes they used conventional ambush tactics. Other times, they would leave gifts of human food that the Corvans were too suspicious to eat. Once, Private Lim convinced an entire Corvan patrol to chase him through a maze of corridors that led nowhere, wasting 6 hours while other humans sabotaged their equipment. "It's psychological warfare," Dr. Bei Yuna explained to the emergency council meeting via encrypted transmission. "Humans evolved as both predators and prey. We had to learn to think like our enemies while remaining unpredictable to them. It's written into our neural structure." Admiral Lee Do-hyun leaned forward on the screen. Are you saying we have a biological advantage? More than that, Dr. Bay replied excitedly. We have a quantum advantage. Human consciousness creates uncertainty fields that interfere with predictive algorithms and telepathic scanning. We're naturally invisible to the methods aliens use to understand other species. Engineer Yoon Ju-won joined the transmission from her hidden workshop. That explains why my hybrid systems are working. I've been combining human technology with captured alien components, but not in the way either was designed to be used. She held up a device that looked like it had been built by a mad scientist. This scanner uses human quantum processing combined with Veltar telepathic amplifiers and Corvin energy cells. It should be impossible, but it works better than any of the original technologies. President Kang studied the strange device on his screen. Can you mass-produce these hybrid systems? Already working on it, Yoon replied. But that's not the best part. Every time I build something new, I'm using principles that alien technology was never designed for. Their countermeasures can't adapt because they don't understand the underlying logic. On New Seoul Colony, Captain Kim Tae-won was putting these theories into practice. The biological weapon that had been killing his people was based on detailed scans of human physiology from years of diplomatic medical examinations. But those scans hadn't accounted for human adaptability. Doctor, what's the status of the treatment program? He asked Dr. Yoon during their daily briefing. The children are recovering faster than the adults, she reported. Their immune systems are adapting to the alien pathogen and developing resistance. We're using their antibodies to create treatments for the older patients. How long until everyone is immune? At this rate, maybe 2 weeks. But, Captain, that's not the most interesting development. Dr. Yoon pulled up a medical display showing cellular activity. The pathogen was designed to target specific human genetic markers. But as our bodies fight it off, we're developing immunity not just to this weapon, but to similar biological attacks. The Senate accidentally made us stronger. Similar reports were coming in from across human space. On every world under attack, humans were adapting in ways that alien science had never predicted. Their technology was evolving rapidly as engineers like Yoon combined different systems in impossible ways. Their biology was becoming more resistant to alien weapons. Most importantly, their psychology was proving completely immune to the fear and despair that the Senate had counted on to force surrender. Private Lim Dong-hyuk was becoming a legend on Titan Base. The young man who had been terrified just days before was now leading raids that left Corvin soldiers questioning their own military training. His latest achievement was convincing an entire Corvin squad to surrender by pretending to be a ghost in their communication system. How does he do it? General Vokran demanded, watching surveillance footage of the human soldier somehow appearing behind his guards without triggering any sensors. Sir, we've analyzed his movement patterns extensively, reported his intelligence officer. They make no tactical sense. He seems to choose his actions randomly, but they always result in maximum disruption to our operations. Randomly? Vokran's voice rose with frustration. There must be a pattern. Everything has a pattern. Not humans, sir, the officer replied quietly. Our computers cannot predict their behavior because they don't follow logical decision trees. They seem to make choices based on intuition. The word came out like a curse. To the Corvins, who had built their entire civilization on mathematical precision, the idea that someone could make good decisions without calculation was terrifying. Commander O was monitoring the conversation through hacked communication channels and grinning widely. Did you hear that, people? We're officially too weird for alien computers to understand. His team laughed, the sound echoing through the tunnels. They were tired, outnumbered, and fighting with improvised weapons against a superior force. By every reasonable measure, they should have lost days ago, but they were human, which meant reasonable measures didn't apply. Lim, you're up next, O called to the young private. What's your plan for today? Lim thought for a moment, his face serious. I'm going to teach them how to play hide-and-seek, Korean style. What does that mean? It means, Lim said with a grin that would have terrified any alien who understood human expressions. They're going to learn that the best way to hide is to make your enemies stop looking for you. Dr. Bae Yuna was still working in her laboratory, but now she had teams of scientists across human space collaborating on her research. What they were discovering about human consciousness was revolutionary. Humans didn't just think differently from other species. They thought in ways that created genuine quantum uncertainty. We're not just unpredictable, she explained to Admiral Lee during their latest briefing. We're actually changing reality in small ways just by observing it. Every human is a walking paradox that makes the universe slightly more chaotic. Is that good or bad? Lee asked. For us. It's the best possible news, Dr. Bae replied. It means we can never be completely understood or controlled by any system based on predictable logic. We're evolution's answer to tyranny. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Senate was beginning to realize they had made a terrible mistake. Their perfect plan to neutralize humanity was failing, not because humans were stronger, but because they refused to follow the rules that made the plan possible in the first place. Senator Yul Thana stared at reports from dozens of worlds where humans were not just surviving, but thriving under attack. Their technology was evolving. Admiral Song Minji stood on the bridge of the flagship Incheon, watching her fleet prepare for humanity's first major counterattack. 2 months ago, she had been commanding cargo ships between Earth and Mars. Now, she was leading 300 vessels of the newly formed Human Expeditionary Force into battle against the galaxy's most powerful military alliance. Admiral, all ships report ready, announced Captain Ryu from the tactical station. The hybrid drive systems are functioning perfectly. Song nodded, looking at the strange readings on her displays. Engineer Yoon Jawan's revolutionary technology had transformed their entire fleet. The ships looked the same from outside, but inside they ran on systems that combined human, Veltar, Corvin, and Nexus technologies in ways that should have been impossible. The result was vessels that could adapt their capabilities in real time, becoming invisible to sensors one moment and unleashing devastating firepower the next. Begin Operation Prometheus, Song ordered. Across 12 star systems, human strike. Teams launched simultaneous attacks on Senate facilities. But these weren't the desperate defensive actions of the past 2 months. This was humanity taking the fight to their enemies with tactics that no alien military had ever encountered. On the Veltar homeworld, Ambassador Na Wubin was having tea with Senator Kilthara, one of the few Veltar politicians who had opposed the war against humanity. The elegant telepathic alien was nervously adjusting her flowing robes as she spoke. Ambassador Na, you must understand the position this puts me in. Kilthara's thoughts whispered directly into his mind. My people believe humans are dangerous, savages who cannot be reasoned with. Na smiled and sipped his tea, carefully controlling his thoughts to project calm confidence. Senator, what if I told you that 3 of your neighboring systems have already signed secret peace treaties with Earth? Kilthara's large black eyes widened with shock. That's impossible. The Senate would never allow... The Senate doesn't know, Na replied smoothly. The gentle swimmers, the crystal singers, and the wind dancers all approached us separately. They're terrified that the war will spread to their worlds. It was a lie, but Na had learned that in diplomacy, the truth was less important than what people believed might be true. Kilthara's telepathic abilities let her sense emotions and surface thoughts, but Na had trained himself to project the feelings that supported his words while keeping the actual facts buried deep in his mind. But why would they betray the alliance? Kilthara asked. Because they're smart enough to realize something the Senate leadership hasn't figured out yet, Na said, setting down his teacup with deliberate precision. This war isn't going the way it was supposed to. On Corvin Prime, the military capital, Of one of the galaxy's most feared empires, Colonel Choi Hana was proving that human special forces could accomplish the impossible. Her team of 12 soldiers had infiltrated the planet's orbital defense network and were currently sitting in the command center of the most secure military installation in Corvin space. "How did you get past our security?" General Vokran demanded, his 4 eyes blazing with rage and humiliation. His personal guards lay unconscious around his office, taken down by weapons they had never seen before. "We walked in the front door," Hana replied casually, not bothering to point her strange hybrid rifle at him. "Your security is designed to stop enemies who think like Corvins. We just thought like humans instead." It had taken 3 weeks of planning, but Hana's team had exploited a fundamental flaw in alien psychology. The Corvins had built their defenses assuming that any attacker would try to overcome their security with superior force or technology. They had never considered enemies who would simply pretend to be maintenance workers carrying cleaning supplies. "Your fleet computer systems are about to experience a small problem," Hana informed the general. "My technical specialist has uploaded a virus that will turn your automated defense grid against itself." "Impossible," Vokran snarled. "Our systems are isolated from external networks." "True," Hana agreed. "But you connected them to internal networks that include coffee machines, elevator controls, and bathroom fixtures. Humans are very good at finding connections that other species overlook." As if summoned by her words, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. On the tactical displays, they could see Corvin warships in orbit suddenly opening fire on each. Other as their targeting systems identified friendly vessels as enemy threats. Dr. Shin. Yujin was coordinating the technical aspects of Operation Prometheus from her command center deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. As humanity's leading expert in military strategy, she had developed new combat doctrines based on their recent discoveries. About human psychology and quantum consciousness. "Status report from all strike teams," she ordered. "Corvin Prime defensive grid is down," reported Hana's voice over the communication system. "Their entire orbital fleet is currently fighting itself." "Veltar diplomatic channels are in chaos," came Ambassador Na's report. "3 more species have approached me about separate peace agreements. The alliance is fracturing exactly as predicted." "Nexus collective research stations have been neutralized," announced Captain Kim from his position in the Andromeda sector. "We captured their quantum disruption technology and reverse-engineered it in 6 hours. Our version works on their ships, too." Dr. Shin smiled as she watched the tactical display update with reports from across the galaxy. Every alien species had the same weakness. They thought in predictable patterns. Humans had learned to identify those patterns and turn them against their creators. "Phase 2 is authorized," she announced. "All units, begin implementation of Doctrine 7. Doctrine 7 was Dr. Shin's masterpiece, a military strategy that could only work with human psychology. Instead of trying to defeat alien forces through superior firepower, human teams would confuse and demoralize them by constantly changing tactics in ways that made no logical sense to alien minds. Engineer Yoon Ji-won was aboard the experimental ship Busan, testing her latest creation in real combat. The vessel was equipped with technology that adapted its capabilities every few minutes, becoming invisible to different types of sensors or changing its weapon configurations based on what the enemy was expecting. "Target acquired," reported. The ship's AI, which had been programmed with human intuition algorithms. "Recommend approach pattern. Wait, changing recommendation. New pattern would be more surprising." Yoon laughed as she watched their Nexus collective opponents trying to track a ship that kept changing its fundamental properties. The alien vessels fired at where the Busan should have been, only to discover it was somewhere completely different, doing something entirely unexpected. "Fire Solution Gamma," she ordered. The Busan launched a spread of missiles that initially appeared to miss their target completely. The Nexus ships began evasive maneuvers to avoid weapons that seemed to be flying in random directions. Only when the missiles suddenly changed course and struck from impossible angles did the aliens realize they had been outmaneuvered by human unpredictability once again. On New Sol Colony, Captain Kim Taewon was leading the liberation of his home world with a combination of righteous anger and tactical brilliance. The colony had been under siege for 2 months, but instead of weakening the defenders, the experience had transformed them into something the galaxy had never seen before. A human population that had learned to fight as one unified organism. "Citizens of New Sol," he announced over the colony-wide communication system, "today we take back our home." The counterattack began at exactly noon colony time. But instead of a traditional military assault, 20 million civilians simultaneously began actions that seemed completely random but had been carefully coordinated. Factory workers sabotaged production lines that were supplying the occupation forces. Teachers led their students in psychological warfare campaigns that left alien soldiers confused and demoralized. Even children contributed by using their natural creativity to invent new ways to make the occupiers uncomfortable. The Corvin forces found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't understand. Every human they encountered acted differently, but somehow all their actions worked together to create chaos in the occupation forces. Within 6 hours, the aliens were retreating in complete disorder. Admiral Lee Do-yun watched the reports flooding in from across human space with satisfaction. Operation Prometheus was exceeding all expectations, but more importantly, it was changing how aliens viewed humanity. They were no longer seen as a primitive species that could be easily controlled. Instead, they were becoming recognized as something far more dangerous, a civilization that could not be predicted, controlled, or defeated by conventional means. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender offers from 17 different worlds," reported his communications officer. "They want to negotiate separate peace agreements." "And the Senate leadership?" Lee asked, still refusing to acknowledge that their strategy has failed, sir. "But our intelligence suggests they're in complete panic." Lee nodded thoughtfully. The hardest part of the war was almost over. Soon they would have to decide what kind of galaxy they wanted to help create. But first, they needed to finish teaching the Galactic Senate a lesson about underestimating humanity. Admiral Lee Do-yun stood in the Senate chamber on Nexus Prime, but everything had changed since his last visit. The crystal towers still sparkled in the alien sunlight, but now they flew flags from dozens of species alongside the blue and white of Earth. The chamber itself had been redesigned, with the floating center platform replaced by a circular table where representatives could sit as equals. The War Crimes Tribunal will now hear testimony from the survivors of the biological weapons attacks, announced Judge Park Soo-min, a human lawyer who had volunteered to help establish the new justice system. The Galactic Senate's former leaders sat in detention cells, awaiting trial for their attempts to commit genocide against humanity. Senator Yulthana, once the most powerful telepath in the galaxy, now looked small and frightened without her ceremonial robes. "We were protecting galactic stability," she said through the translation system, no longer able to project her thoughts directly into other minds since the neural dampening field had been activated around the defendants section. "By trying to murder an entire species?" Judge Park asked calmly. "Your own military report stated that the biological weapons would have killed every human child under the age of 10 within 6 months. Dr. Park Mina, now serving as Earth's Secretary of Interspecies Relations, was presenting evidence to the tribunal. The defendants spent 3 years planning these attacks while pretending to engage in peaceful diplomacy. They collected detailed biological and technological data during every cultural exchange, every trade negotiation, and every diplomatic meeting. The evidence was overwhelming, but Admiral Lee wasn't focused on the trials. He was watching the gallery where representatives from 47 different species sat together, many of them talking quietly with human diplomats. The galaxy was changing, and not in the way the old Senate had intended. "Admiral," whispered Ambassador Na Wubin, sliding into the seat beside him, "the vote will be held tomorrow. Are you ready for this?" Lee nodded slowly. Tomorrow, the species of the galaxy would vote on humanity's proposal to dissolve the authoritarian Galactic Senate and replace it with a democratic confederation where every world had an equal voice. It was a radical idea that would have been unthinkable just 6 months ago. "How many votes do we have?" Lee asked quietly. 32 confirmed, 8 leaning in our favor, and 7 still undecided, Na replied. "The opposition has collapsed since the trials began. Even species that supported the war are now admitting they were manipulated by the Senate leadership. Commander, Sung-min was on the other side of the galaxy, helping to establish the new Interspecies Integration Bureau. His job was to assist former enemies in becoming productive members of galactic society. Today, he was meeting with a group of young Corvan officers who had requested permission to serve alongside humans in the new Galactic Defense Force. "Sir, we understand if you cannot trust us," said Lieutenant Korvash, his 4 eyes downcast with shame. "Our people attacked your colonies and tried to enslave your species." Studied the young alien's face, remembering his own anger during the siege of Titan Base. But anger was a luxury humanity could no longer afford if they wanted to build a better galaxy. "Lieutenant, I'm not going to pretend the war didn't happen," said carefully. "Your military killed thousands of my people. But you weren't the one who gave those orders, were you?" "No, sir. I was still in training academy when the attacks began." "Then we have 2 choices," continued. "We can spend the next century hating each other for things neither of us did, or we can work together to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." The young Corvan looked up with hope in his eyes. "You would trust us to serve beside human soldiers?" "Trust is earned," replied. "But everyone deserves the chance to earn it." Engineer Yoon Ji-won was in her new laboratory on Nexus Prime, leading the most ambitious technology-sharing program in galactic history. Representatives from dozens of species worked alongside human scientists, combining their knowledge to create innovations that none of them could have achieved alone. "The quantum harmonics are stabilizing," reported Dr. Velkari, a Nexus Collective scientist who had defected from her own government during the war. "The hybrid propulsion system should allow faster-than-light travel without the environmental damage caused by traditional jump drives." Yoon smiled as she watched species that had been enemies just months before collaborating on projects that would benefit everyone. "What's the estimated improvement in travel time?" "Approximately 40% faster with 60% less." "Energy consumption," replied Dr. Zixtal, a crystal singer whose mathematical abilities complemented human intuitive thinking perfectly. "But more importantly, the new drives will not damage space-time fabric like current technology." This was humanity's real victory, Yoon realized. Not the military defeats they had inflicted on the Senate, but the proof that cooperation produced better results than conflict. Every hybrid system they developed was superior to the original alien or human technology used separately. Admiral Song Minji was overseeing the formation of the new Galactic Defense Force, integrating military units from dozens of species into a unified command structure. The challenge wasn't technical. It was convincing former enemies to work together as equals. "Admiral, we have a problem with the Veltar units," reported Captain Kim from the communication station. "They are refusing to take orders from human officers, claiming telepathic superiority." Song sighed. Some alien species were having trouble adjusting to the idea that humans were their equals rather than their inferiors. "Schedule a meeting with their unit commanders. It's time for another lesson in human stubbornness." The meeting took place in the newly constructed Unity Station, orbiting Nexus Prime. Song faced 3 Veltar military leaders, their pale faces showing barely concealed arrogance despite their recent defeats. "Admiral Song," said Commander Yuldara, "surely you understand that telepathic communication provides superior coordination in battle. Our units should operate under Veltar command structure." "Commander," Song replied patiently, "your superior telepathic coordination just lost a war against a species you considered primitive. Maybe it's time to try something different." She activated a holographic display showing battle footage from the recent conflicts. Watch this engagement between mixed human Corvin units and a pure Veltar fleet. The mixed units adapt their tactics in real time, while your forces stick to predetermined patterns that become predictable. The Veltar commanders watched in uncomfortable silence as the display showed their forces being outmaneuvered by teams that combined human unpredictability with Corvin strategic planning. The new defense force isn't about proving who's superior, Song continued. It's about combining our different strengths to create something better than any of us could achieve alone. President Kang Hyun-woo was preparing for the most important speech of his life. Tomorrow, he would address the Constitutional Convention, where 47 species would vote on the framework for their new government. The speech had to convince beings with completely different psychology and values to trust in democratic principles. "Mr. President," said his chief advisor, "the final draft includes provisions for species with collective consciousness, telepathic communication, and quantum-based decision-making. Every form of intelligence will have representation." Kang nodded, but his mind was on the bigger picture. Humanity had won the war, but winning the peace would be much harder. They had to prove that their way of organizing society was better than the authoritarian system they were replacing. The Constitutional Convention began at dawn, with delegates arranged not by species hierarchy, but alphabetically by homeworld name. It was a small gesture, but one that emphasized equality over traditional power structures. "Fellow beings," President Kang began, his words translated into dozens of languages and communication methods, "we gather today not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals seeking a better future for all our peoples." The chamber was silent. Hundreds of different species listening to words that many had never expected to hear from any government. The Galactic Senate failed because it was built on fear, Kang continued. Fear of change, fear of losing power, fear of species that thought differently. We propose something new, a confederation based on hope. Hope that we can work together, hope that diversity makes us stronger, and hope that every species has something valuable to contribute. The debate that followed lasted for days, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Species after species stood to support the new constitution, many citing their positive experiences working with humans during the reconstruction efforts. When the final vote was called, 45 species voted in favor of the Democratic Confederation. Only 2 abstained, the remnants of the old Senate leadership who still couldn't accept that their authoritarian system had failed. Dr. Park Mina was appointed as the first Secretary General of the Galactic Confederation, with Admiral Lee as the first commanding officer of the Integrated Defense Force. But the real victory was smaller and more personal. Former enemies learning to work together, species that had never communicated before finding common ground, and a galaxy slowly discovering that diversity was a strength rather than a threat.